Since the 1940s, many African countries have built solid relations with Russia and China. These engagements extend from deepening ties in North Africa, extending its reach in the Central African Republic and the Sahel, as well as in the southern parts of the continent. African countries firmly support China in its endeavor for national unification, and most of them support her One China policy. Russia and China have carried out many exchanges in the fields of economy, politics, and planning in Africa. That is why today we shall be looking at why Africa will stand firm with Russia and China. There is also one thing you will like to note before we get to more details. Africa has suffered many atrocities from Western nations from pre-colonial times to the early 2000s, and so standing firm with Russia and China could serve as a means of protecting African nations from future molestation. China and Russia are, however, pursuing different strategies towards Africa, but share a convergent goal of bolstering authoritarian regimes and undermining US and European influence over the continent. This is clearly seen through their commercial, financial, and military engagements, which all aim to accelerate a shift in Africa from Western influence to the East. Africa is important to China and Russia, same as they are to Africa. Amid global crisis, these countries have always supported Africa, both in material and human aspects. In turn, these countries receive natural resources from African states, notably oil and gas from countries like Sudan, Angola, and Nigeria. We shall begin by looking at some atrocities caused by the Western nations on Africa in recent years, and why Africa will stand firm with Russia and China under 5 subheadings. These reasons are well explained in the domains of military, health, economy, politics, and humanitarian assistance. Do not go away till you discover the amazing facts we've prepared for you. Let us begin. The West's hand over Africa. It is quite difficult to imagine that the sufferings of the African continent will end soon. On December 10, 2013, world leaders and a host of people from across the globe honored the deceased former South African president, Nelson Mandela, as one of the greatest African heroes. More than 90 heads of states from across the world attended the event, including former US President Barack Obama, who described Mandela as the great liberator of the 20th century. On one of his speeches, Mandela mentioned that if there is a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They don't care for human beings. But this view did not stop US leaders from comparing Mandela to Washington, Lincoln, and Gandhi. Mandela was in great support for communism and highlighted that with such a system, South Africa and the continent at large will become a land of milk and honey, with an easy political and socio-economic atmosphere. Before he stepped down, Mandela gave a radical speech implying that there were vast conspiracies in place seeking to overthrow the South African government. This landmark speech paved the way for his successors to implement brutally repressive measures. Some months ago, President Joe Biden held a democracy summit with South Africa, the very place where Western powers such as the US, UK, and France supported racist activities. Another terrifying atrocity caused by the West on Africa, which is also questionable, is the ill treatment they gave to former Prime Minister of Congo, Patrice Lumumba. In 1961, Lumumba was captured and imprisoned by state authorities under Mobutu and executed in the presence of Belgian military officers after his overthrow in a coup organized and executed by Belgium, Britain, and the United States. He was severely maltreated, dismembered, immersed into acid, and murdered afterwards for reasons best known to them. The West murdered Patrice Lumumba and kept President Nelson Mandela in captivity for 27 years. Recently, President William Ruto of Kenya decried the mistreatment of African leaders during foreign trips, especially to Western countries. In April 2023, during the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend held at the Kenyatta International Convention Center, he lamented that they were loaded onto buses like school children during the funeral of Queen Elizabeth, while US President Joe Biden and his wife were transported on armored vehicles. The intangible strain that unifies individuals is culture, which is crucial to any economy. Apart from the scenes you just saw, it is important to note that Western culture has not only had a substantial influence on African politics, economy, and community interactions, but also on the people and generations. Substance dependency, divorce, fashion sense, colonial mentality, custodianship, brain drain, amongst others, are some disadvantages of the Western culture you must be aware of. Africans should never hate China and Russia because of the massive support they received from them when the West was busy committing atrocities on the continent. Apart from forging a solid bond with China, Russia has been working towards further consolidation of its presence in the global south in several African countries. Africa will stand firm with Russia and China for the following reasons. 1. Military. Russia maintains a modest professional military education program for African military personnel, training roughly 500 African service members per year. This gesture is an obvious necessity for both Africa and Russia. Some African countries like Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, Sudan, Senegal, and Zambia are great buyers of Russian arms. To them, Russian arms are affordable, easy to maintain, and reliable. In fact, African customers are increasingly willing to purchase more sophisticated weapons from Russia, including fighter aircraft, helicopters, tanks, and air defense systems. China, on her part, has continued to provide military aid to countries in Sahel, the Horn of Africa, and the Gulf of Guinea, and policing equipment to countries such as Namibia and Central African Republic. 2. Health. Africa will stand firm with Russia and China, not only because of the military advantages she enjoys, but also assistance in the domain of health. As an emerging donor in health-related development across the world, and particularly towards Africa, China has been increasing its influence within the field of global public health over the past few decades. The Chinese government has always initiated projects to respond to major diseases in Africa, such as HIV and AIDS, malaria, influenza, fever, and the recent COVID-19 pandemic. In October 2019, President Vladimir Putin of Russia highlighted that Russia will continue to help African nations develop their national healthcare systems, while ensuring a wide access to highly qualified medical services in a bid to strengthen Africa's potential in controlling epidemics. 3. Economy. China is now Africa's largest trading partner, with Sino-African trade topping about $200 billion per year. Over 10,000 Chinese firms are currently operating throughout the African continent, and their performances are very encouraging. Most substantively, Africa depends on Russia for 30% of its grain supplies, with a value estimated at $4 billion. It is also evident that Africans will stand firm with Russia and China, looking at the thunderous investments they have put in different businesses on the continent. Trade relations between Africa and China have increased the prosperity of African countries. This is because they have been able to increase the value added of their exports and also export more to the rest of the world. Looking at this, it is certain that Africa will still stand firm with these great nations for a very long period. In many African countries, China is not the most important trading partner at all, but other Asian countries, especially India. Reports from Kiel Institute for the World's Economy have it that African companies are rapidly generating new knowledge about technologies and markets through exchange with their Asian partners. With more exports to Asia, imports from there are also on a rise, which increases the productivity of African companies. Amid global fertilizer shortages and rising prices since 2020, aggravated by the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russian chemicals company known as Uralchem agreed to donate 260,000 tons of fertilizer to African countries most at risk of food insecurity. The attractiveness of African exports and their price competitiveness are also on a rise, and this is a positive indicator of their relations with China and Russia. 4. Politics. China and Africa enjoy a long-standing friendship and always show sympathy to each other in times of need. The African continent holds a special position in the overall layout of China's diplomacy. In 2006, both parties set up the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation dubbed FOCAC, which serves as a mechanism for dialogue and pragmatic cooperation. China has always been an active participant, supporter, and vindicator of Africa's peace and security affairs, and is the contributor of the largest number of peacekeepers to Africa, out of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Information from the UN shows that in the past 25 years, 16 out of 24 peacekeeping missions carried out by China were in Africa. Till now, China has sent 60 ships in 21 batches, 46 helicopters, 1,300-member special task forces, and 17,000 officers to provide escort services for 6,000 Chinese and foreign vessels in Africa. Russia has arguably expanded her diplomatic influence in Africa in recent years, just like China. However, Russia uses an irregular means of gaining influence in Africa, and it can, in the long run, destabilize the continent and its citizens. Do not forget to like this video if you are enjoying it. We now move on to the last point. 5. Development, humanitarian assistance, and education. Africa generally consists of least developed countries, according to the United Nations. However, through collaboration with countries like China and Russia, some of the poor countries near the coast, south of the Sahara, such as Nigeria, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, have benefited from trade and are working their way up the global value chain. Infrastructural projects set up by Russia and China in Africa are conducive to promoting regional economic integration, lowering transaction costs, and expanding market access. Since the establishment of FOCAC, a lot of changes have been made in Africa. China's stance is widely acclaimed and welcomed by African countries and people. A number of resolutions were taken at the 8th Ministerial Conference of FOCAC in Dakar, Senegal in November 2021. The Chinese government promised to support African countries that were hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as to continue providing aid to refugees in Africa. Africa will also have to stand firm with China because, at this conference, the Chinese said they will actively expand the import of quality agri-foods from Africa and open green lanes for African agricultural exports to China. Talking about education, Russia and China maintain a series of educational and cultural exchanges with Africa. An estimated 15,000 Africans study at Russian universities, mainly from Nigeria, Angola, Morocco, Tunisia, and Namibia. This shows a steady growth and serves as an indicator that ties between Africa, Russia, and China will continue. Many people often say that the greatest gift Africa has ever received from the West in Christianity, which is now the majority religion on the continent. However, some also complain that the strange faith instituted by Western countries belittled, replaced, and repressed traditional spiritual systems. Sometimes, we have to make a strong decision to do or cling to what is best for ourselves. There are lots of things to talk about concerning this topic, but we carefully selected a few from the bulk to share with you in this video. We hope you grasped a thing or two from this video, or you simply added meaning to what you already know. Before we take leave of you, let us try to find out answers to this question often asked by many people. Should Africa be considered as a permanent site for Russian and Chinese influence? Please share your point of view with us in the comment section, and also do well to always visit the New Tourist channel for our engaging videos on topics that will get you fully informed, educated, and entertained. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.